Hey, Cody here with AM Solar, and I'm going to show you a Dodge Ram 2021 CCP connection point. If you look in the pillar of the passenger side, they have equipped this particular model with what they call option code BC3. This plug down here is wired with 8 gauge and is intended to be utilized for up to 50 amp auxiliary upfitter. You could utilize this for a single 30 amp Orion charging system. The trick is that you have to source the receiving end of this plug, and that's a little difficult to find from our experience. Another option would be to cut this plug out, use a splice lug and some additional cabling to extend this where you need it to go. Chances are if you do that, you will void the warranty on the chassis alternator, but in this particular application, the customer wanted more alternator charging capability. So instead of using the factory CCP, we went straight to the battery system, and we will show you what that looks like next. Another thing to note is that this is not an ignition controlled circuit. It's actually constant 12 volts. And if I can fumble this here, I'm going to show you that it is actually receiving constant voltage from the chassis battery, which is 12.8 volts right now. Like we had said, in this application, the customer wanted more power than their consumer connection point could handle, so we made a direct connection to the chassis battery, fused it, and then routed that back to a Cyrix 230 amp lithium supportive combiner isolator. If you look down here at the floor, this is where the Dodge Ram chassis battery resides. Normally, if you take the cover off, you're going to see this red cover, which is over the top of all of their chassis connections, and they don't give you any space to connect any new circuitry. So we had to come right off the main positive post here with a brand new cable, and we routed it down into a fuse, a mega fuse. I believe that is 150 or maybe 200 amp rated. The cabling then routes down and out underneath the chassis and all the way to the back of the vehicle, which is where we had to put the Cyrix in this application, because there's not a lot of good space to mount that device without getting in the way of either the chassis battery serviceability or possibly in the way of the customer's just normal operation, sitting in their seat and swiveling and so forth. So it's a little unusual to mount the Cyrix as far back as we have, but in this application it'll work fine. The cabling is supportive enough, and the last piece of the puzzle is just to make the chassis ground and wire up the Cyrix. We'll show you that next. Now we're going to show you the Cyrix wiring on the house side. Looking at this beautiful AM Solar installed system. Right here is the Cyrix LICT 230 amp. Normally, we would put this closer to the engine battery, but this particular application posed some mounting and orientation issues. So we ended up bringing it back to the house system, which works. It's just not going to be as efficient as it would be if it was in the engine bay. But we ran some pretty heavy-duty cabling to mitigate the voltage drop. And the biggest challenge after you've wired the system up and you've protected it appropriately before the house connection is to establish a good chassis ground. On this particular application, our installers source their ground connection to the body of the vehicle behind the board. If you look down in here, there is a nice painted post. We actually installed this post. We had to grind away at the factory paint to get a nice connection with our ground, and then paint it over it. And that is our chassis ground connection on this application. And we are set for action and ready to test the system.